Hello and welcome to the EDRM Global Webinar channel. My name is Mary. I'm the CEO and Chief Legal Technologist for EDRM. Today's webinar is the cheapest document to review is the one you don't review. It's sponsored by our wonderful Guardian partner, Rico. Our faculty expert is John Thacher, the Director of eDiscovery Managed Review Services for Rico Legal. And this is an interactive webinar. We welcome your questions and feedback in the console. There are links to a case study and more information on the attachment and links tab to your right. And this webinar will be recorded and available for replay at your convenience. We're very, very grateful that you are spending the time with us during these very, very challenging times we find ourselves in. Our moderator today, as I said, is John Thacher, the Director of eDiscovery Managed Review Services for Rico Legal. He's got 15 plus experience in our community and industry, and he's managed over 400 review projects with 8,500 employees. John has direct experience managing all phases of electronic discovery, from pulling documents to the finalization of the privilege log, and he's going to show us how to contain some costs. John, welcome to the platform.
Thank you very much, Mary. I appreciate the invitation to be here today, and it's nice to be virtually with everybody today. I appreciate the chance to have some company on a rather dreary New England morning up here. So, or afternoon, I guess now, and it's almost like being with you all in person. Not quite as nice, but we'll take it for what it is. Yeah, almost. So it is a pleasure to speak to everybody, and I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable asking questions. Feel free to type them in, and if it pertains to what we're doing right away, then we'll be I'll try to answer it right in the moment, and if not, we'll get to it at the end. There should be plenty of time here. I did not make this too long. I wanted to get a chance to really get at the pithy stuff and not spend a lot of time on niceties. So as Mary said, I've been at this a little while. My first doc review project was back in 2001, at the end of 2001, and it's been a crazy ride since then. And I still really love this topic. I still really love trying to make this come out. It's very complex every time to invent an expert system and to somehow make it come out exactly the way the associates want at the end of the review, not necessarily at the beginning. They don't necessarily know what they want at the beginning of the review, and sometimes it's a discovery process, as we all know. So, so building an expert system while you're trying to get it perfect at the same time is never an easy thing, and there's a lot of complexity to it. I think it's why I still enjoy it almost 20 years later now. So let me go forward a slide, and let's kick this thing off. So one of the things that comes up a lot is cost containment. And a lot of people have spent a great deal of time thinking that cost and quality are diametrically opposed. They are not. In fact, they're intrinsically linked. It's one of those unusual things that really the best way to contain costs is to control the quality. And so you've probably all heard this saying about whatever you care about controlling, you should measure. And so the measurement of quality really turns out to be the key ingredient to driving cost containment. And there's no substitute for it. It always seems really antithetical to a short-term process like we have in doc review. You know, if you come in and you've got a 2-week turnaround, 100,000 docs to be reviewed in 2 weeks and hit a deadline, how are you going to control costs in that? That's really a huge challenge, or control quality first and then cost secondarily. It's a huge challenge to do that. So one of the things we've really worked at over the years is driving automated turnover reporting, automated QC of individual reviewers into the first week. You know, if there's a 3-day turnaround, we're going to get what we get. But as long as we get past the first week with a turnaround and a deadline, we can start to control the quality. And once we control quality, then we really can control the cost. Really, the best and easiest way through any document population is to look at a document one time, to mark it perfectly, to redact it perfectly, to log it perfectly, and then to move on to the next document. And it depends on each document, but the fact of the matter is we have a lot of questions. We generally average about 35 to 50 questions for every new review we have. We do question log process, so we're asking and answering each question one time to keep the associates from losing their minds. But basically, we're able to get at the finer adjustments within 35 to 50 questions. More complex protocols sometimes require upwards of 100 to 150 questions, but generally it's a reasonable, manageable amount of questions that we're asking in the range of 30 to 35. And with those 30 to 35 questions, we're asking, okay, you said marketing documents are not responsive. You said advertising documents are responsive. Well, this is a marketing document talking about advertising. What should we do with this one? And so we fine-tune the thing. The protocols are living things. We might take a shot at writing them down up front, and associates and companies often do. But then as soon as we start trying to apply the protocol to real live documents, there's always a period of really trying to fine-tune it so it's workable, so that we don't have all kinds of conflicting rules, and we can look at any document and all come to agreement about what we should do with this document. So one of the things we've done that really, we've been doing it for a while, and it's gotten more and more sophisticated as we go, and fortunately so. Basically, we're measuring quality and speed each time out. I never want to tell people speed is irrelevant, because it isn't. The clients all want to know what the budget's going to be. They all approve a budget. They all want to know if there's any overruns coming, and there's always a chance they're going to use a different company if we do not come in under budget. So we always want to come in under budget. We always want to pleasantly surprise people, and we're always looking for that edge. And honestly, when we're left to our own devices, we put in more QC and more PMs on team leads on a project. We find it saves money by spending more leadership in QC. It actually drives quality control, and it drives cost containment, because you don't have to go back and re-review documents ever. And so that's a great thing. But we're measuring every single project, and that's what you want to hear from a company that you're using, is that they measure speed and quality every single time out of the box. They want to know that you should be able to tell them, hey, we score on a 5-point scale on cost, on quality and speed, and we actually have a category called intangibles as well. But basically, each time out of the box, we are measuring people. And it doesn't have to be a perfect measurement system. It just has to be a measurement system that's standardized over time, that's consistent over time, and that drives the rehiring of people who are doing the best job at producing review documents. Fairly simple task to review a document. You look at a document, you decide if it's responsive or non-responsive most of the time, you decide if it's privileged or not privileged most of the time, and you decide if it needs redactions and if it has any issues that the case team cares about. It sounds simple like that, and then it gets very, very detailed and complex the more rules that are added. So the training is one of the pieces. The two pieces I think that get overlooked a lot early in the review are training and quality control. And we try to get quality control on every single individual on the team within the first week of the review. So we're trying to at least look at one of their batches and do a good sampling, like upwards of 50 documents out of a 200 doc batch. And that really, it gives us a quick update on, is this person understanding what we were trying to train them? Are they seeing the things the same way? Is there something we missed on the training? Is there something that we need to address? Is there a misunderstanding? Am I misunderstanding something as the trainer? Did I lead the team astray somehow? And so we're looking at a much more elaborate training system than you would normally think of for review. In the old days, we always had, we'd get 1 million documents and 100 people in a room, and we would provide an hour training, hour and a half training, and it would be basically it would be the case team reading the protocol, the review protocol, and then everybody was off to the races at that point. And what we found was that in those first 2 weeks, as people are running up the learning curve, you can either really drive consistent behavior across the team, or you can wait and see how many mistakes they make, and then really have a heck of a time trying to track down every single mistake that was made. And so we just decided at some point, let's look at everybody right away and see if they're getting this. Because if driving quality is the key to speed, it's like tying your shoes. When you were 3 years old, it took you a while to tie your shoes. You'd use bunny ears, you'd fumble a little bit, the things would come undone 3 times a day. When by the time you were 8 years old, you could tie those things in a flash. And it's just because you know what you're doing, and you have confidence that you know what you're doing. And so that's what we're trying to instill in everybody is confidence in that they know they're doing the right thing. And to do that, we need to know that they're doing the right thing. And so we spend a lot of time training, a lot more than most, I think, these days, and hopefully the world is catching up. But in a typical training model, you would show, tell, do, repeat as needed, and you would do it over and over again until people really get it. And that's if you care about the quality. And essentially, we'll drive in that kind of approach on training, and we'll do the QC on the backside. So we use the QC as a primary training methodology. So we feed back individual errors that people are making and are being corrected on almost, it's not quite real time. I mean, they do it one day, and we're hopefully feeding it back to them within the next 2 or 3 days, so they can see. And so we encourage people to go back in, see all the overturns they've had, and it really makes a big difference because sometimes we overturn things, and it turns out that we were wrong. They'll come back and challenge us, and we'll go to the associate and say, hey, what did you really mean by this piece of the protocol? Did you mean us to apply it this way or this way in this situation? And sometimes the reviewers have a more sophisticated understanding or have a more nuanced view than I do as a QCer, and hopefully that's not the case most often, but it happens occasionally. And the rest of the time, it's a good training opportunity for the rest of the team. So we'll get together, we'll have a little 15-minute meeting, 15-minute Zoom call where we'll go over what are we seeing, what are the overturns we're seeing, what are the updates to the question log from the attorneys, and how can we do this better, and what do we see? And so that early QC feedback, both to the individual and the groups, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in creating a consistent work product early, and it makes a huge difference in diminishing the number of errors and the error rate of the whole team. So a lot of the early comparisons with different automated systems really had people just go, and I participated in some of them as the review team as well. And typically, if you take a review team and say, here's a protocol, here's an hour training, and go ahead and mark documents, you're going to get about 85% of them right. 80 to 85%. It seems to be the number it comes in over and over again, and it really does actually match with our experience. So basically, if you don't interfere with that, on a $1 million doc review, you're going to have 150,000 errors to find and correct at the end of the thing. So it really behooves us to go and interfere with that natural error-making process, and the way we do that is with QC. And the way we do it is feedback and training on that QC. And it really changes the equation. So we can start to get the overall review team producing, it's never error-free. There's always different documents in different situations and things missed. People are human. But we can start to climb into the 95% and up correct rate. And then we rely on QC to find the other 5% and correct that as well. And so that's the basic, I always thought it was funny with automated assisted review. The assisted review ran 7 or 8 trials. It would go back and fix, and you do samples. Well, we do the same thing in human review as well. And it's one of the things that drives quality for human review is QC and feedback and saying, hey, this was marked wrong, go mark everything right from now on. So one of the key pieces that has really helped currently is the automation of our QC measurement. And that piece allows us to just go do QC, and it starts to count who are we overturning most often, what kinds of things are we overturning. We can go down the list and see, okay, it seems like everybody's missing the marketing documents. We need to do a refresh with that, and maybe we need to bring the associate back in to talk about that, or we need to look at what we're changing and find out why people are marking them consistently the wrong way. So that's one of those things that has really helped a lot. It's helped us, especially in this time when all review has moved remote. Fortunately, we had that in place ahead of time, and so I don't know how people are doing it informally now, because it was always a challenge to get the message out to every single reviewer about the quality and the changes we wanted to see and what they were doing. And this automated piece allows us to feedback the 13 documents that they did over the first week that we changed for some reason. And so it's really driving a quality into the process that doesn't depend on personalities. It doesn't depend on a review manager standing over somebody's shoulder or walking around a review floor. It doesn't depend on people in-person meetings. And so that's all good. That's all helped us to really just move pretty smoothly into a fully remote review. And so, the in-person piece is still missing. That's missing, but this in some ways this is better because the in-person piece sometimes allows for less talented individuals with big personalities to get ahead when really it should be a quieter person who's doing better work who should be getting ahead. So feels cleaner. So let me go on to the next slide. And feel free to chime in with any questions. If there are any, I don't see any yet. So one of the key things that really drives cost containment is the understanding that all reviewers are not created equally. So anybody who's done a review totally understand that, everybody reads at a different speed, everybody makes decisions at a different speed. Probably part of the reason I got ahead is I'm a really good Minesweeper player, and I make decisions very, very quickly, and I tend not to get blown up with them. As a Minesweeper, and I can sit still and I read really fast. I was just a voracious reader as a kid, and so for me, doc review came very naturally, and it was very easy. 100 docs an hour was not a big deal for me, and as long as the protocol was clear, I was making good decisions. And I was kind of surprised actually to understand that not everybody was in exactly the same boat. So it took me a while to really understand this, but we had this classic review early on, big second request, and we had 1 million documents, so of course we had to hire 100 people. Nobody really knew why we were hiring 100 people. It just seemed like 1 million called for 100 people. Years before it had been 200 people, but we realized we didn't need that many. So we hired 100 people. We got through the first review, I don't know, maybe 27, 28 days of review. And then as we did in the day, we would start QC at that point. And so we started QC and we started going through all the documents, trying to get them right. And this was a firm that really cared about getting things really perfectly. So the gold standard at that time, and this is, we're talking 2005, 2006, the gold standard back then was review everything a second time. And so we were basically, after the first pass review was done, we let go of about 80 people, kept 20, and we went through all the documents again with 20 people, all the responsive documents anyways. And we found a 15% error rate. One of the most interesting things we found, though, was that about 10 people had produced 92% of the mistakes, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, you're talking 10 people created 140,000 mistakes. It's just insane. And so we obviously decided, well, we're never going to hire those 10 people again, And then the next step in that is like, well, you know how much easier life would have been if we just didn't have those 10 people with us in the first place. And the other piece that came out of it was we're looking at everything that's responsive. Again, we ended up looking at the whole population again with the top 20 people. And what we realized was that, we just got through this whole document set with 20 people. Why did we ever hire 100 in the first place? And just that rough kind of, those rough numbers tell you a lot about how much savings is possible by employing quality as your key metric, and quality is your chief measurement driver. So, if you're taking everybody, if you're finding those people, those 10 people in the first week of the project, you can cut out, maybe we would have cut out 130,000 errors that needed to be repaired. And that's remarkable. That's a big change in cost. If you don't have to track down and fix 130,000 documents in a review, that's you're saving $100,000 to $100,000 right there easily. if you're talking about 20 people doing the work of 100, if 100 people cost $1 million, whatever it cost at the time, then 20 people doing the same work in the same amount of time is going to cost 1/5 of that, or $200,000. So when you're looking at savings, $800,000 in savings, $100,000 in savings on $1 million docs is, and we've seen it play out. It's totally possible. We've seen cases where the other side reviewed the same document population we did, and the partner confided to our partner, boy, it cost us $2.5 million for the review, and we had just, our client had just spent $300,000 with us. And so basically, we know that this system works. We've had it compared. We've actually had it audited. There was a big Silicon Valley client that audited the results and was finding that on the typical case, and we were doing a lot of patent cases for them, typical case, they were saving $500,000 every time they use our managed review system. So it has an impact. We know it has an impact. There's a lot of challenges with it. So the challenge is, you've got 3 weeks. You've got an associate who's kind of panicking. It's a high visibility kind of enterprise. The associate's is being watched by a partner, and if they don't produce on time, they're SOL. So we really are trying to calm them down and get them to see that they can use less people, that if they use the better people, it'll come out better. And let's take time to QC and train properly to make sure it's done right out of the gate. And for the most part, it's starting to have an impact. People are starting to understand it. I think some of it is that associates, especially senior associates, are looking at docket review as a key component to proving up their case. They want to be involved at least to the level of understanding what we're finding from good for the case, bad for the case, hot kind of materials, and they want to be a little bit more involved in how the protocol gets applied, and they don't really mind having us spend a little extra time asking them questions. If we're going to ask them 35 questions over 2 weeks, that's not that annoying. If 10 reviewers are going to ask them questions individually over 2 weeks and get up to 500 questions, that overwhelms them. They can't deal with it. So the organization of the system makes a difference, but it's all about measuring your people, because once you measure your people, then you can find a quadrant that is both good and fast. That's on the slide. So that's the top 25%. Do we get to hire the top 25% on every project? No. The good people, I've got people who literally we just switched a guy, and his email that is still on relativity is 4.5 years old. We know because we just changed emails at one point 4.5 years ago, and his email was still the old email because he has been with us that long. He's been working with us steadily because he's good and fast. And so every moment he's wanted to work, we've had work for him to do. And it's a little difficult shuffling people from case to case. You have to have client cooperation. You have to convince clients of the importance of good and fast people and what a difference it can make for them. But what we find generally is that if some ridiculously low number, like if 3 people out of 10 are in that top quadrant, the review is going to come out fine. It's really remarkable what a difference 3 of these good and fast people can make on a case with 10 reviewers. So, imagine what happens when we get 70%, and we do get 70% in there. We've got some people. We've got a cadre of about 55 people who've worked with us over 3 years now, and so it speaks to the system. The system works. They enjoy themselves in it. We try and treat them pretty well. We actually do everything in our power to make their lives a little more livable. They're actually mostly enjoying the remote work these days. A lot of them have liked the flexibility a lot. A lot of them had been asking for remote review for a while. So they're a bunch enjoying it. There's a bunch who actually enjoyed being on the floor with everybody else too, who are lamenting not being able to see everybody else. But for the most part, we're trying to get into that top 50%. We try to keep every project at a 90%, 10% ratio. 90% of people we've used before, 10% of new people. We're always looking for the new, good, fast people. There's turnover in the review world. Nobody wants to be a temporary employee forever, necessarily. And so they get jobs. The good ones especially get jobs. And so we're always looking to replace that top quadrant and supplement them. And honestly, the more I get, the more work we can do for more people, and the better work we can do for more people. Okay. So the other piece that's grown more, this is the piece that's really grown incredibly important over the last, I'd say, last 4 or 5 years especially. At one time, it used to be that review companies or staffing companies were separate from hosting companies that were relatively or otherwise providers. And now you've seen a combination of the two. And there's real advantages with a combination. And the chief amongst them is me being involved early on. So I can tell you that over the years, there's been many, many, many reviews where we've gotten to the review population and we look and we see, you know, half the documents shouldn't be in there. They're a total waste of time to review. And basically where you can see this trend changing is that in the old days, you had 10% responsive out of a review population, you were doing okay in 2005. By about 2010, you were looking at, you know, 18 to 22% was kind of a normal review population. Right now, if not a lot of keywords are run, you're still looking at 27, 28% is kind of a normal review population in terms of responsiveness. But once you start running keywords, we're regularly seeing, we just did a case where we were trying to employ tar in it. 90% of the documents, 92% of the documents were responsive. And so we just couldn't find enough good exemplars of non-responsive documents to really ever get the system to train that well. And at the same time, you know, when your collection is that finely honed, that almost everything you collected or pushed forward into review is responsive, essentially we were just checking for privilege at that point. And they could have turned over almost everything after a check for privilege. So that's a big deal. It saves a lot of money. There's a case coming up I'll talk about a little bit, but you know, we've seen results with keyword searching combined with tar, combined with being smart about the collection and being smart on the review and continuing culling after the review started, where we've we've reviewed 91% of all the documents collected on 4.5 terabytes. Huge result in terms of money savings. In the old days, that would have never been cut down more than 2.5 million docs from originally 15 million docs. So we would have looked at 20%. We would have considered that a great success, and it probably would have been in 2010. Right now, it's not enough. Data volumes keep growing. Moore's law is a thing. It's real. It keeps growing. Every collection is bigger. We're seeing a lot of firms that were one time, they didn't have to worry about eDiscovery that much. They were a small state firm, and the states didn't even really have much in the way of rules around eDiscovery. And they never had a collection more than 10,000 docs, so they didn't care. Now we're seeing smaller state cases coming in with 180,000 docs collected, and state attorneys who've never really dealt with eDiscovery going, what do I do with this? And we love working with those clients. We love it because basically we say, okay, we could try this, this, and this. Let's work on some keywords. Let's work on a few rounds of keywords. And essentially what happens is with the whole system approach, we've got my review team and my review managers now working with the lab as it's coming out, as keyword search terms, reports are getting generated. Our team is involved. And we're digging into the purpose of the review, and we're digging into, well, why do we need these documents? What about these? And there's a sampling process now. And so we can go look at like this big population, like that hit on, there's a classic case we did that involved power management for batteries. And one of the custodians was a born-again Christian, whose signature block included the phrase, "May the power of God be with you." And so every single time, every single email with the signature block hit on the search terms. And that one was an old case where we got to that custodian very late in the day, and we ended up reviewing 110,000 documents, 2,000 of which were responsive. Big waste of time. But we learned from it, and we got my team more involved in the upfront piece, and now we see, there's this one custodian, all their documents hit on a keyword, and that keyword is power. Let's go take a look at those documents and see what's going on. And basically, we could have written a script pretty easily to get rid of that now. and we would have cut that review down to 4,000 docs. And that's the value of the whole system approach to this, is that when you've got one team kind of approaching things as a group, we've got the project managers, we've got my project managers, we've got the relativity project managers, we have the project managers in the lab, all working together and saying, does this make sense? Hey, could somebody take a look at this? And we're more than happy to jump in and take a look. We typically get more involved once it's getting pushed into relativity, but overall, we're working on the purpose of the review, and we'll help with keywords as well, and because we've seen a lot. And the other thing that happens is sometimes things slip through. We'll get a valid keyword where half the keyword hits are invalid for a common reason, and we'll stop the review. We had a small review recently, 22,000 docs, where when we looked at it, we said, hey, I know this keyword is valid for this case, but can we get a limiter read to by the other side, because look at all these that are hitting on this term. And we went back, we stopped the review for 4 days. When we came back, it had dropped from 22,000 documents down to 4,000 documents. And so client was super, super happy with that. We got 4 referrals from that client to other firms. So it was a great win for us, and it was just us doing our job well and doing it as a whole team. And that really, that's really our mantra is the culling doesn't stop just because it's in relativity or just because it's been uploaded. We're always looking for those opportunities to cut big swaths out. We've taken to having a step where our project managers get in a day before the reviewer gets in and just start poking around. Just look around for, what are we seeing here with the search hits? What are we seeing with groups of documents? Let's just sample through. Let's look at 500 documents over the first 10,000 and see what we're seeing. And we'll sometimes cut out 5% of a review before it's even batched for reviewers, which is the most convenient time to do it. So generally speaking, the technology-assisted review piece is it's an important piece. We're big believers in it. It helps you avoid looking at docs, which is the title of this presentation. We're finding on average it's somewhere between 30 and 40% savings on a very rough average. The problem is and why it's very difficult to get anybody to promise a particular level of savings is because the variability is really high. So that review where we had about 300,000 documents, but 92% of them were responsive, and the system just never really came to a point of stabilization. And it was one of those funny things. We just kept looking at docs, and it never really got stable on responsive, non-responsive. We had to look at everything basically for privilege anyway, so it wasn't a loss, but it didn't produce much of a savings, maybe 5% savings in the end. And then other times, we'll take 15.5 million documents and cut them down to basically 330,000 docs to review. And so you're looking at 15.5 to 330, that's 3% or something. And that's huge. That's huge with all the pieces along the line. So that's much more like a 97% savings. So it averages out at 30 to 40% savings using TAR, but it's really difficult to say in any one instance what it's going to save for any particular client. And that's a little bit of the challenge on the sales side with TAR. We generally advise using it because the worst that's going to happen is your review population is going to be all responsive, and we're checking it for privilege anyways. So put it in, it doesn't cost that much, and mostly we see decent savings. Okay, so this is a kind of one case study. I think we've got a link to this case study maybe attached as well. And basically we collected 4.5 terabytes. It unpacked at about 15.5 million docs. We did 5 rounds of search and data filter development. The associate was super involved and really sweated over it. And he knew he wasn't an expert, and he relied on all of us. So he actually wanted our opinion on everything as well. We actually, I think it did a great job. We got it down to 770,000 documents. So 5%, we cut out 95% of the docs. And then we loaded those into relativity, and then we ran TAR. And basically, well, before we ran TAR, our review PM found another 105,000 documents that were kind of, they were the smaller groups that we could get rid of. So you couldn't get rid of them on the keyword exclusions as well, but you could, if it's a particular newsletter that's all hitting on the same term because it's in the title. And it's a single term hit. That's the kind of thing you can track down a little bit through keywords, but this was stuff like, I don't know, like HR stuff, where people's resumes were hitting. So we figured out how to exclude a bunch of resumes in different formats. And so that produced a bunch of savings, and then Active Learning cut it down to $330,000 for review. And so, you know, when you're looking at that, that's just a win-win-win all the way across. We finished our side of the review was finished a month and a half before the other side finished their review, and we were literally looking at the same corpus of documents. So it was the same server. It was a long-term business partnership that was breaking up, and they had the same files to look at. And so you can just imagine what a kind of an advantage that was for the firm. They were pressing on the other side to produce for the last month and a half. The other side just looked like they couldn't get their act together. Then they rushed. They made a bunch of mistakes. The other side did, and that was to the benefit as well. So big advantage. Time is a major weapon in litigation, and it really, whatever you can do to speed up the review and get to the documents you really care about and the facts, the quicker you can set course to the proper resolution for your client. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up everything fairly quickly here, quality measurement is really the key to efficiency and cost containment. Hire the best and fastest. Take your time reducing document populations with search and filter and TAR. Engage with us early. We're a great source of advice early on. We do not mind. We don't charge when we're brought into things early on. You know, we'll give you advice about how to collect. We'll give you advice about how we've done a lot of this over many, many years. When we're brought in early, we can have the greatest effect on things. And that's don't be afraid to ask questions, because we know what we're doing, and we actually do this because we like it and we like explaining it to people. Remote review has also really helped us to pull from a larger team, pool of reviewers, and so it feels suddenly like we've got a lot more top 25 percenters available to us, and at the same time our measurement systems are under way more pressure than they ever were. So we're looking to automate that at every turn, and we really feel that that's the key going forward in review, is to automate the measurement of QC, because the more it's automated, the more you can really compare apples to apples among reviewers and get the good ones. And it's easy to tell the differing speeds of people. You just measure their speed, how many docs per hour they're doing. So that's the easy part. It's really how are they doing quality-wise, because if somebody's doing 20% error rate at 80 docs an hour and somebody else is doing a 2% error rate at 50 docs an hour, who should we keep on? You know, that's a tough call right there, because it's probably the 50 docs an hour person with a 2% error rate is probably the one we should keep. But it's close. It's close because the 80 doc an hour person produces a lot more. If we can somehow get them to get better, then maybe we keep that person, or we at least have interest in them and training them more extensively. And then really it's all about the established systems and workflows. Take the guesswork out of this. Get a good system in place, and it doesn't have to be our system. It's a good system of measurement of quality. If you can tell people, yeah, we had a 4.2% overturn rate on this case, once you've got control of your cases like that, that simple measurement makes a big difference. You know, when you can tell people, yeah, with our QC rate, we normally look at about 19.2% of the documents. When we're not doing the QC and the firms are doing the QC, it goes down. It goes down from there. It's the way it does, and I've measured that as well. And so it's these measurements tell you how to manage the process, and without the measurements, it's still kind of guesswork. We're a younger industry. There is some guesswork involved still. We don't have everything played out. TAR hasn't been wrapped into the process perfectly yet across the boards for every review company and every vendor. There's different kinds of TAR, and the way it's applied depends a little bit on the review platform. So there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to master, but having good measurements of individual quality on every review is probably the place to start. So with that, I think that's kind of the heart of what I've got prepared as kind of prepared material, and I'm definitely able to go into some things in more detail if people want. If it's some backup slides, I could go over as well.
Well, thanks, John. I'm very curious about how you were able to break down the silos to get information about the front end, from the front end into project management and into your review strategy and your data reduction strategy. Many organizations are siloed, and it seems like you've been able to break that down.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Review was probably the last piece added at Rico. So I joined Rico a little over 5 years ago, and we had a review operation, and it was fairly young at that point. It was still 2 years old at that point, and so they had been doing project management from it was a different approach. So it was a very vendor side approach. So they were very interested in hearing more about why people review, what they're doing here, why is the associate being a pain about this piece, why, there was a lot of curiosity, and we just had a natural curiosity. That's the first thing I think amongst the people at Rico. They just wanted to know more about the review side and how to serve it better, basically, and how to serve those clients better, because that was their client base, was the review teams. And so now they had somebody, a captive in-house, who would answer all their questions ad nauseum. The other piece I'd say too is my boss spends a lot of time breaking down silos, both within our division and within bigger Rico as well. It's probably his greatest asset is his ability to get people to work across silos, and so there's a real, we have a saying internally called one team, and we really look to act as one team. Like, because we look at it like when a review is successfully done, we just did a review, and one of the guys working on the review ended up with a position at a small firm as the head of lit support at a small firm in Florida, and he reached back out to us because he was so impressed with our relativity PMs and how we managed kind of the system and the template of the review. He reached back out, and I've got him hooked up with a sales guy, and we're going to do some presentations on bringing Rico into that organization. And that kind of thing is possible because everybody's in on the email. So I don't have a lot of emails with the client that then I bring the relativity PM into. I include the relativity PM, and we actually have a distribution. They're included right along. And I'll often get an email like I'll say something that isn't quite right about our technology, and I'll get one of our solution architects chiming in and saying, hey, that isn't quite right. You want to say it this way, and then I'll go back and say, okay, here's really what we can do. Or actually, people will say, like we just had one where it's like, hey, we're actually demoing a technology that will do what you're saying we can't do. Go back to the client, see if they want to try it. And so that kind of thing, because everybody's involved and because we've spent so much time breaking down the silos, it's a natural kind of occurrence, but it takes work. It takes, I can tell you what it takes. It takes a weekly call with the head of each silo and my boss involved. And it also takes, quarterly 2-day meetings where we're going over every single thing everybody's doing on a strategic level, and we're looking strategically across the whole organization. What it is what's missing? What is one silo doing well that another silo is not doing? How can we make things more uniform? How can we improve the customer experience? So you can tell just from I'm talking on your question, we spend a lot of time thinking about that and working to break them down. And I think that's really at the heart of why we're having some success around that.
That is really interesting. And along that the human element of things, you were talking about your fast and good reviewers. And do you source them differently? Do you treat them differently, or are all reviewers lumped into like one?
Well, when they first come to us, they're all the same when they first come to us. They're just another name and another relativity login. And then after the first day, we'll have batches of 200, and most everybody will get through a couple batches. And then you'll have one guy get through 6 batches. And you'll say, who's that? somebody better get some QCIS on that person. He's either our new best friend, or he is our newest nightmare, or somewhere in between. And so that person, really, the first 5 people finished with batches generally are the first 5 people QC'd. And then the next 5 people QC'd are the people who get through their first batch slowest. So it's funny. It's one of those things where we've even charted learning curves for the first 3 weeks over 50 people on a review. It was remarkable how little prediction was capable after the first week. Like I'm a very prime example of that. So I ask a ton of questions at the beginning of the review. I don't step over anything, which is a strength. But the first day or two, I'm maybe finishing a batch, and I'm asking a ton of questions. I'm kind of being irritating to an associate, possibly. I have been known to be irritating to an associate by asking too many questions. Yet, once I get my questions answered, after about 2 weeks, I'm doing 3,000 docs in a day. And so I have seen people fired in the first week for only getting through a batch a day. And so what the lesson here is, we don't know who they are coming in the door. We know about 10% of them are going to be amazing. So 1 in 10 is going to be amazing. We know 3 in 10 are going to be people we're really interested in keeping a long-term relationship with. We know 5 in 10 are going to be people who get the job done, and we don't have to worry about screwing things up. And they're going to make clients happy generally. And if there's a corpus of documents that's large, we need those 50 documents per perfectly kind of person. And so what it's really about for us is kind of determining who lies where on the spectrum. And we don't treat them differently coming in. It's really hard to tell. I've had sometimes people coming right out of law school are just super hungry. And you look at their qualifieds and their bona fides and their law review. They're really interested in this or that. They've published. They're like really sharp people, and they just haven't found a job because of an economy. So at some point in the last 20 years, and so I had somebody who ended up leaving us and going to clerk for a federal judge for not for Judge Peck, but for the other eDiscovery judge. So they worked for us for a year and then went to clerk for a federal judgeship because their credentials were so strong. But then I've got other people coming from a lower tier law school who are just super hungry, hardworking, and they have a peculiar intelligence for it. I don't think of review. I've known people who have great credentials who are horrible reviewers, and I've known people with horrible credentials who are great reviewers. And it's a little hard to tell until you take them out for a run. And, pretty quickly they tell you who they are. And then we don't make permanent decisions about people for at least 3 projects, because subject matter does make a difference sometimes for people. Some reviews are easy. Some people just like to go fast and have simple reviews. Some people like the complexity and really like to dig in and get everything right and absorb a big rule set. So we don't know who's coming in the door. But once we see them, then we do everything in our power to drive differentiated treatment of those people. So we will raise pay rates up. Even if we can't raise bill rates up sometimes, we will raise pay rates up because they're that valuable to us. We will also give them as much flexibility as we can. Somebody who's a temp attorney, they often have other stuff going on. I've got a temp attorney who's literally starting a business as they've got a laundromat. They started up a laundromat. They always wanted a laundromat. That was their big dream before they ended up going to law school. And so they've got a laundromat going. So sometimes the pipes break and they have to be there. We have a lot of flexibility about that person because that person also is solid gold in terms of the work they do. They just do great work for us, and they always hit 40 hours every week. Sometimes those 40 hours are between 7 p.m. and midnight. And do I really care if they're doing perfect work and they're doing plenty of it? I don't. And so they're getting that kind of flexibility from us. They don't always get that. It takes more management skill. It takes more management effort to accommodate that kind of situation. But the fact of the matter is, they deliver it back to us in spades because they're making clients happy. Then the clients come back to us. So for me, it's all about treatment of people. We also I like to say we've got a sliding scale of accommodations for people. So if somebody's making a lot of mistakes and barely showing up, I don't have much. I'm a very traditional kind of staffing company in some ways for that person. But as soon as a person, shows real talent for this and enjoys it and wants to keep doing it and is trying to figure out how to fit it in their life, I'm all about that. Especially these days of COVID, our reviewers have kids at home now. We haven't had to struggle against that. We haven't had to compete with that. We've got a lot more people signing in between 7 and midnight than we ever have right now. And you know what? We haven't seen the work drop off. We measure them consistently on projects. A lot of them were on a project when they went remote. And so we were able to see their productivity didn't drop off. They know the standards we set. They know the standards we have, and they like to be treated well, and they like to work consistently. So, and many of the reviewers actually really like to work. That's one of the things that goes overlooked. Some people are just like to do one thing at a time and like to not have the legal work follow them at home at night. And this is a really good way to do that. And some people are doing other things. They're teaching. They're teaching at night. They're working on a book. There's a lot of different things. I had one reviewer who would work for 6 months and then she'd go on adventures for 6 months. She would go motorbike across Australia. She would go, kind of hang out and learn to surf somewhere. She went to Thailand for 6 months and learned to Muay Thai box. And so she's just an adventurer, and that's how she paid for it. And whenever she's around, I hire her because she's great when she's around. Does good work and does plenty of it. So I think I probably covered your question pretty extensively there.
Well, that's fantastic. And you had mentioned that some people will be excited to return to more of a communal review situation. What are you doing to bring your are you doing anything to bring your remote reviewers together now? Now that we're in this work from home situation.
We're kind of embracing this. This is what we're embracing. I think it's one of those things. The pay for review has never been. It's never going to match up with a first-year associate pay at a decent-sized law firm. And so, what we have to offer is life. It's kind of life-work balance, and we have remote review really does that. It gives people a lot more opportunity to flex their work around their lives, and it's really important to some people that they do that. They don't care about making 100,000 plus in a year. I mean, they'd like it if it came their way, but they're not willing to trade, doing half the time homeschooling their kids at the same time, or caring for an elderly parent. We have a fair amount of people who do that as well. And so those pieces are critical. I think we've all seen that review. It was on a natural collision course towards remote review anyways. You can source from a much larger population nationwide. I think we're going to hone in on the nationwide pricing. That's generally kind of, this is what the pricing is, this is what the pay is for reviewers, and this is where pricing comes from. And I think there's going to be a lot of homogeneity in that. And then the piece to it that really is going to probably come next is, the bottom line is if you've got somebody doing 100 docs an hour perfectly, and you're paying them, you're paying $35 an hour for them, then, that person is basically at 33 cents a doc is what they cost the client. If you have somebody doing 50 docs an hour perfectly, that person is at 66 cents a doc. And there's a real difference in cost. And so I think at some point, there's been some toes in the water. Some of the farmers have gone this direction, and I've managed a bunch as well, where we've done per doc review, where we guaranteed a certain per doc rate. It's a little challenging because as soon as you guarantee a per doc rate, you're going to get the most complex protocol in the world, and you're going to get nothing but 75-page PowerPoints and big Excels to redact. So it's challenging. The system is going to be challenging to have in play, but it's clear to me that some people are worth a lot more than others. And mainly when people are worth a lot more, they really deserve to be paid more, and you should be willing to pay more for them as well. I know I am in my personal life.
Yeah, perfect. I love all of the statistics that you've given, the savings that have gone directly directly to your client's bottom line. This has been a fantastic presentation. And so if folks want to reach out for more information, John, you've got a slide up here, sales at ricoforensics.com, and you've got the website at -usa.com, and your very own email.
Yeah, absolutely. People can feel free to reach out, and with questions too. Like, we find that our relationships with people often start with, like, oh, what would you do with this case? And most cases do not go to review. So just by calling me, you know, some number of cases that we estimate don't go to review ever, or don't go to external review. It's just not necessary if you're doing the front pieces up front. But I'm more than happy to talk about it. I'm more than happy to hook them up with a solutions architect or one of our salespeople, and to get them across the whole spectrum for whatever they might need. You know, we really are kind of one team. So you can look at me as a one touch point on that one team, and I'm more than happy to direct people into wherever they want to go. So my email is open, wide open for anybody who has a question.
And that is John Thacher, Thacher, at
Rico-usa.com.
There we go. Well, we would love to thank our wonderful partner, Rico, for making you, John Thacher, available to us today. Thanks, John, for your wonderful presentation, and our thanks to the EDRM community for your kind attention. We will see you next time on the EDRM Global Webinar channel.